Next thing I want to share with you is a quality called passion. Now, passion will come out in different ways. And I want to share a quick story, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to do a little exercise with you for a second. Has anybody heard of this gentleman? His name's Derek Redmond. Okay. Write this down. 1992 Barcelona Olympics. It's the 400 meters, I think it was the semi-finals. Go watch this. It's one of the most moving clips. I watched it live when it happened, and I was just sat there transfixed. Because I believe that when somebody's totally passionate about what they're doing, they're on purpose, it doesn't matter what comes up, they will keep going and they'll do whatever it takes to get to where they need to get to. True or false? And sometimes you and I have to make those decisions. This is a classic example of that. He's 200 meters into the semi-final 400 meters. This is a guy that spent his whole life from a young boy growing up training to become the world #1 at 400 meters. If you were to touch him, his body would be like that, it'd be solid. Every single muscle in his body is sinewy, tight, and he's running like this. And he said, all of a sudden at 200 meters, he heard a, and he thought it was a gunshot, but it was actually his hamstring snapping. Now you can imagine this. He hears this, and in a split second, he just drops, just like I did over there, to the floor. And a dream, which has been a lifelong dream, gets taken away in an instant. Now, the average person outside of this room, outside of his passion, would have just done this, hung their heads, and got off the track. But guess what happened? Now, his father was in the audience. So he stood up. Now, by this time, the race is over, 44 point something seconds. He stood up, he looked across like that, and he started to walk. And the pain, I mean, he was literally in tears. The pain was just, you could see it in the video. And his father came down from the stand. The security were trying to stop his father. He ran across all this security, grabbed his son. Initially, Derek actually pushed him away, wondered who he was, realised it was his dad, and started to walk him round. Does anybody remember this? And I mean, I still get quite emotional thinking about it, because for me, it just epitomises what somebody does when they're completely on purpose. It wasn't about winning the race at that point. It was about fulfilling, in his mind, he said, I'm going to get around that 400 metres. Because to me, I've spent all these years training to get to that point. And you can see there, he was crying, his father was crying, and the whole of the stadium, and I mean, there must have been millions, if not a couple of billion people watching it around the world, were stood like this, and everyone clapped because of the person that had won. And then there was a silence, and then there was, and you started to feel it. And the whole room, I was about 10 of us watching at the time, we all started to clap. And then you saw the whole stadium clapping. And as he walked across that finish line, the rest of the world weren't behind the person that won, they were behind the person that had passion. So why am I sharing this with you? Because what he does now is he goes out and he speaks to audiences. He never quite regained his form, but what he did do, he started to resonate in a different place as a star, not on the sports track, but in front of audiences. And I've seen him touch children. I worked on a project up in Birmingham where we were working with kids from really difficult backgrounds, challenged backgrounds, and he came in with myself and a couple of other people, we spoke, and he told his story, and it just grabbed people. Each of us have got something in our past that we can use to share. I mean, my mother got cancer 4 or 5 years ago, and at the time it was difficult for me to deal with, but now I share it with audiences because we helped to cure a cancer through her diet. And for me, if I can share that with people and somebody sees that and thinks, I want to try that, it's a chance to help somebody else. Does that make sense? So it's important to have a passion. And I believe for each of you in this room, that passion starts with a dream. There will be a struggle as part of the journey, and there will be a victory at the end of it. Any movie you've ever watched, like Braveheart, who's watched Braveheart? Imagine watching the film and you see a young William Wallace and he stands there and he sees, I think, everybody got killed in the movie, and the next thing, it's the end of the film and he's just saying freedom. It wouldn't be quite the same, would it? Without the struggle, it doesn't quite have the same feeling, agreed? So accept that that's part of the journey, and that's also part of balance as well. So just for 1 minute, I'd like you to share with the person next to you something that you are really passionate about as an individual, that you'd like to take out to the world. Just 1 minute. Again, which is purpose. I actually believe that none of that I've just shown you there means anything unless you have a true, passionate purpose about what your message is. Don't even stand up in front of an audience without that purpose, because they will see right through you. Has anybody had an experience where you sat and watched a speaker and you've just gone, it doesn't quite feel right? Or, you know, you've got a bit antsy and you're feeling a bit... Often it's because they're not flowing. They're sort of teaching something they don't totally believe in. So never get up and speak on something you don't comfortably believe in and that is part of your value system. So purpose. I often get asked the question, how do I know what my purpose is? How can I define my purpose? How do I find it? A lovely exercise to do is try this. Spend spend a whole weekend, if you get the time to do this, or over a period of a few weeks, and get a load of DVDs out, films, that in the past you've been inspired by, that when you've watched them you felt a lump in your throat. Or you felt, I'm getting it now actually, you get goosebumps on the back of your head. Or you get moved to a point of being in tears. Anybody had that experience? And whenever you get to that point in the movie, stop, take a deep breath and write down whatever feeling you've got going on here. And if you add this to going back in your life to times when you've been inspired, where you've watched somebody who's inspired you. Very first time I ever saw Lynn Twist speak, and it was actually on YouTube, I actually cried. The very first time I heard Wayne Dyer speak on one specific area he was talking about, I was moved to tears. So if you go back to that point and you write down what was going through you internally, not in your head, because most people live up here, in your heart, start to do that, and if you do that consistently for a few weeks, I promise you a message will start to emerge. And that will very much tell you what your core purpose is. Who's getting this? Now, those of you in the room that are very logical on the left-hand side going, oh, well, I'll put a system to that. You can't really put a system to this. Apart from maybe DVD one I could watch at 11:15, it will finish at 2:15, and then okay, so you could do that. However, I'm going to ask those of you that are less on the right-hand side of the quadrant, the ones that are more logically minded and you sort of get yourself into numbers, just give yourself the privilege of connecting in here. Has anybody heard of heart